Okay, I can see that our participant number is climbing as everyone is joining the room. So I will go ahead and get it started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar. Tonight, we will hear from Abby Malloy to discuss health and wellness, and I look forward to introducing her here in just a few moments. Please note that tonight's presentation will be recorded. While everyone is logging on, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Ashley Pichard, and I'm the Manager of Program Relations here at PracticeMatch. Hopefully, since you're here tonight, you already know about PracticeMatch and all that we have to offer physicians. Hopefully, you're coming right on over from the career fair. But if not, I do want to highlight a few of the resources that my team and I have available to you to make sure that you get the most out of your PracticeMatch experience. So we have a free CV builder and free expert CV review, scholarships, a job board where you can see job postings and filter them by specialty, geographic preference, visa status, and more. You can create a profile and fill in your preferences. That way we can notify you about jobs that come open that match what you're looking for. We have virtual career fairs that connect you with employers hiring in your specialty. And we're also bringing live career fairs back this year, so that's exciting. And you can also earn some additional revenue during training by attending our career fairs, and even more additional revenue by becoming a physician ambassador and encouraging your colleagues to attend. We have free monthly webinars on various topics regarding training, interview preparation, contract negotiation, immigration assistance, loan repayment, and more. And if you think that your program would benefit from a personalized training on any topic mentioned above, we can do that too. We also have a free physician immigration handbook that is provided by Siskin Susser. And we have a network of experts in just about every physician-facing industry. So if you ever have any question related to your career search, you can reach out to PracticeMatch and we'll be happy to provide you with mentorship and guidance. Now, let's learn a little bit more about how to nourish your body and mind. Please note that microphones will be muted throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to utilize the chat feature and Abby will get those answered for you at the end. And if there's anything that doesn't get answered here, or if your question is personal or specific to you, Abby will also share her contact information at the end of her presentation. That way you can reach out to her. So Abby is a registered dietitian nutritionist with a passion for gut health. She earned her bachelor's degree in help me out, Abby. Is it dietetics?
Dietetics.
Dietetics. Thank you. I'm not familiar with that one. Forgive me. So she earned that at the University of Central Missouri and completed her internship at the Medical University of South Carolina. Welcome, Abby.
All right, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks PracticeMatch for having me. Like she said, we're going to be going over a functional approach to health and wellness, and my name is Abby, and this is a little bit of background about me. She did go over some of the good points of my background. I did work in a variety of inpatient and outpatient settings in Missouri before opening my own private practice, Abby M Nutrition. And that does focus more on digestive issues and celiac disease. I myself have celiac disease and really empathize with that patient population. I love working with them. And I did want to bring more of a functional approach into my private practice. So I did complete some continuing education in functional nutrition through the Functional Nutrition Practitioner Institute. And what we're going to go over today, we're scratching the surface of a lot of different topics in a more general mindset. So we're going to go over a whole food approach, taking our general nutrition recommendations a step further, non-nutrition tips, and the mind-body connection, as well as the gut and immune system connection and why that whole body approach is so important. I hope by the end of this, y'all will have an idea of how to incorporate a functional approach to health and wellness, should you choose to do so, how to answer general nutrition questions that patients may ask you, and that whole body connection and why we need to not only address the physical side, but also the mental health side of wellness as well. And we'll start with what is a functional approach. I feel like in the conventional world, or at least in my experience, we hear functional, we're a little weary. It typically makes people think of maybe not as evidence-based approaches, very restrictive diets, super supplement heavy. But really, to me, a functional approach means more of a root cause, whole body approach. We all in our work, we use symptoms as the body's way of telling us that something is wrong. And we use that in our patients to provide a roadmap to that root cause. But I found as a dietitian in healthcare systems that when I had my hour that I was hopefully allotted with a client, I was really educating them on how to address their symptoms, but not necessarily how to address why those symptoms started in the first place. So, for example, I usually had a lot of clients coming to me with reflux, very common symptom. And during our time together, I would be educating eating lower fat foods, low acidity foods, no spicy foods, limiting the time frame that we're eating so that we're not eating too close to bedtime. And not that those things are wrong when we do have reflux and we are addressing that, but by being able to look more at the body as a whole, their past medical history, maybe some other symptoms that are going on. An example of potentially finding a deeper cause to that could be H. pylori, which we know is a well researched strain of bacteria that, when there is an overgrowth, can cause reflux. And as a dietitian, I would think, okay, during our multidisciplinary team that we're all working with for these patients, somebody does have H. pylori. What is going on in the microbiome that may lead us to be more susceptible to that overgrowth? Or how can we support our digestive system so that this doesn't happen again when we do address the root cause? And what we're going over today is more of foundational and general wellness. But when I'm working with a lot of my patients, I show them this picture here. You can see the foundational layer of that pyramid is the basics. If we don't have a good foundation of nutrition, hydration, sleep, exercise, or stress management, we really can't refine or help to have long term resolution in symptoms such as digestive issues or hormone issues that could be cortisol levels being off or thyroid hormone. If we don't have a good foundation, we really can't truly heal the body. And I know I can't see you guys, but I do want you to sit and think as doctors. Have you gotten through those general nutrition courses that are in all of your training? Then I want you to think, have you had any specialty training or continuing education in nutrition, whether in your specialty or just in general? And then I want you to think how often you get asked nutrition or wellness questions from your patients. And I would assume the answer is probably all of you, because doctors are the front lines of healthcare. You guys are readily accessible more than necessarily dietitians are. People see primary care providers once a year, they'll see specialists when they're referred, but not necessarily seeing a dietitian. So what I've found is questions that either I get asked a lot or I found other healthcare providers get asked a lot are, what's the best diet to follow? What supplements should I be taking? And what kind of exercise should I be doing? Some very basic questions that I get asked often. And we're going to kind of go over what my approach would be to this and what I have found works really well with my patient population. So, in terms of what the best diet to follow is, I actually suggest a whole food approach as opposed to a specific diet. And the reason for that is it's not that there aren't helpful diets out there. We know the Mediterranean diet, for example, really emphasizes whole foods, very beneficial for us. But what I found is what the general population gets exposed to in marketing or ads or what we're seeing is so many fad diets. It's how to restrict certain foods that we're eating, but we aren't really teaching them how to fuel the body. So by putting less parameters, people, a lot of times when they come to me, they've either done some chronic dieting that might be harming their metabolic health, they don't feel hungry during the day, they're under eating, or they have a lot of stressors going on. So by adding more restriction, we don't tend to see long-term results, or they don't follow diets for the long term. So by incorporating not what we should restrict, but what we should be focusing or adding more in is whole foods that gently guides them away from that standard Western diet. And it can slowly help them create better habits. Once we have a better foundation, we can, of course, individualize what foods we should be emphasizing. But I think that going about it in less of a diet approach and more of what we can incorporate more of really helps with that disordered eating mindset that I think is super prevalent in people that have chronic illness. But what I do go over with them not only is a whole food approach, but also how to eat balanced and how to eat consistently. This image here is something that I go over with everybody in our first meeting, regardless of what the issue is that we're talking through. And this is how to balance our plate. It would be about a fourth of our plate containing protein foods. I suggest starting with about 20 to 30 grams, but individualizing that as we need to. A fourth of our plate being carbohydrate foods, and then the other half of the plate being non-starchy vegetables. Fats are usually added in either in our cooking techniques or as toppings, so we educate over that, but that typically does meet fat requirements too. And what that does is when we're able to balance our plate in a way that helps us with blood sugar control, helps with metabolic health because we're getting a lot of balance in throughout the day too, and stress management, we're actually giving our body the fuel it needs to be more resilient to stressors. And there is a lot of, I guess, hot topic about fasting. I don't necessarily recommend fasting myself just because if a client is coming to me or patient's coming to me with a physical stressor, symptoms, or they've been under eating for a while now, putting a restriction on time frame or restricting when they can eat is really not going to benefit them in the long term for where they're at right then. I think trying to incorporate 3 meals a day is super beneficial for healing the body. I normally suggest having breakfast within the first hour of eating. If you're not hungry for breakfast in the morning, that can be a sign that metabolic health is poor. So trying something in the morning within an hour of eating can help to build up to that breakfast meal. And then eating about every 4 hours after that would be a general suggestion. And moving into the gut immunity connection, we're actually talking about this earlier on in the presentation because of how much our digestive health is in line with our overall health. And that will tie into taking those general nutrition recommendations just a step further. In the gut, we have about 70 to 80% of our immune cells, and our microbiome can impact our immunity. So by supporting our digestive health through the right foods and practices, we're actually supporting our overall health because that can help our body be more resilient to illness, fight off illness, or bounce back from an illness quicker. We do have a lot of defenses in our digestive system as protection, such as the microbiota, our intestinal epithelial layer, and the mucosal immune system. And microbiota are impacted by external factors such as nutrition, stress, antibiotics, or pollutants and toxins. In the epithelial layer, it is the physical barrier that keeps the bacteria in our digestive system from the tissues outside of it. It's a layer of cells that have tight junctions to keep that lining together. And the mucosal layer kind of reinforces that epithelial lining, as well as houses the secretory IgA or immune defense in the gut. So very important functions on both sides there. If those layers are disrupted, for example, if we have a lot of stressors that can negatively impact our beneficial bacteria in the microbiome, that may lead those layers to be more predisposed to having issues with that function. That can lead to low-grade chronic inflammation as well as illness susceptibility. So by supporting the digestive health side of wellness, by consuming gut-healthy foods, addressing stress, which we'll get to a little bit later on in the presentation, and focusing on those key foundations, that positively impacts our immune system by keeping our barrier function strong, building up the beneficial bacteria in the microbiome, and that creates a good environment where we're not leaving a lot of space for potential overgrowth of dysbiotic or the bad bacteria. So when we suggest taking those general nutrition recommendations just a step further, while I do recommend whole foods, I do also try to incorporate gut healthy foods as well. That would include prebiotics, probiotics, resistant starches, and fiber. We know fiber is in our fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and also in the other categories that we're going to go into a little bit further today. Prebiotics are currently defined as a selectively fermented ingredient that results in specific changes in the composition or the activity of the GI microbiota and confers a benefit on the host. So prebiotic foods actually feed our good gut bacteria and promote a more diverse microbiome. They're very common foods that you're either already consuming or you can easily get at the grocery store. That would include leafy greens, onions, bananas, garlic. And I do suggest, if you're not used to eating these foods, starting in small amounts and slowly building up. That way that can avoid any potential side effects of going really fast and hard into prebiotic intake. And probiotics, they're currently defined as live microorganisms intended to have health benefits when consumed or applied to the body. So, probiotic foods or probiotic supplements introduce live bacteria to the digestive system. What I don't think is educated on enough with probiotics is that they are transient, meaning they don't necessarily recolonize the gut, but they have different benefits depending on the strains of probiotic that we're taking in. So with supplements, I do tend to be more individualized. There's a lot of research coming out on different strains having different benefits on different disease states. But if somebody's wanting to dip their toes into probiotics, there are some well-researched food forms such as yogurt or kefir, some not as well-researched options that may provide a benefit, but we're still looking into would be options like kombucha or kimchi, for example, more fermented foods. And resistant starches. I think this one isn't talked about as much as pre or probiotics, but just as beneficial. And it's just like it sounds, it's a portion of starch that is resistant to digestion. It can't be digested by the amylases in the small intestine, therefore passing into the colon to be fermented by the microbiota there. So once it reaches the large intestine, they feed the good gut bacteria similar to prebiotics, but they also break down to form short chain fatty acids, and those are very beneficial for the digestive system. They can serve as an energy source for the cells of the colon. They can combat negative bacteria or bad bacteria and promote barrier function, among other benefits. And just like prebiotics, they are very common foods to be consuming. Cooked or cooled rice or potatoes are an option. Cooling them actually can increase the resistancy of the starch. So if you're meal prepping or you cook that first and cook the rest of your meal after that to let it cool, that can provide more benefit on the body. And you can reheat it after it's cooled. That won't decrease the resistancy, the resistancy of the starch, but it still has a benefit to allowing it to cool for some time. You could also try adding in beans or lentils, green bananas, or chickpeas. And moving into supplements, I do tend to be more weary when it comes to adding in supplements. I always make sure that there's a reason we're adding it in. And I think that in the general population, there's a lot of just taking supplements that we hear have a benefit, but we don't really know how that's going to impact the person as an individual. So I don't love general supplement recommendations, but I did want to address it as best as I could during this presentation. So we're going to go over general multivitamin recommendations, as well as minerals, which I think do need to be recommended more for the general population. This is probably the most controversial slide of the presentation, so bear with me. But when we think of taking a general multivitamin, a lot of times that's recommended for if somebody doesn't have a great nutrition base and they're looking to fill some gaps in the diet. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to want to do that. But I do think that one, patients may tend to use that as a fallback and they don't tend to try to make more nutrition changes with their food when they know they have that option. And two, general multivitamin recommendation needs to be more specific to the person, just because we know that if we're taking too much of one vitamin or mineral, that can decrease the absorption of another. For example, if we're taking a lot of vitamin D, that may decrease our absorption of magnesium, which is also important. And multivitamins, just like all supplements, aren't regulated. So the amounts vary in terms of what brand we're taking, as well as what is in that multivitamin. A more whole food choice could potentially be beef liver supplements. It's thought of in the functional space as a natural multivitamin. And I know I don't eat beef liver in 2023, but desiccated beef liver supplements, you can see the benefits that beef liver can provide in this slide. And a benefit of having more of a whole food option is we know that synthetic versions of vitamins or minerals that are in multivitamins may not be as readily absorbed and utilized as a whole food form. And with beef liver being a whole food supplement, it is in smaller amounts per capsule than a lot of the multivitamins out there. So you can individualize how many capsules we would recommend based on somebody's lab values. Uniquely, this is a whole food version of vitamin A, which isn't as prevalent in the diet as well. And hydration and minerals. We all know the benefits of drinking water throughout the day, how important hydration is, but we do need to talk about minerals as well and their role in hydration and a lot of functions in the body. So with minerals, we know back to our basic science classes, we need things like sodium or potassium to move things in and out of the cell. And that can keep us more hydrated at a cellular level when we're getting enough of that in the diet. Minerals also help with energy, hormone, and enzyme production, a lot of basic functions in the body. But our soil is not as mineral dense as it once was, meaning our food is not necessarily as mineral dense either. And when our body is under a lot of stress, it can tend to deplete minerals at a more rapid pace than when we're not stressed. And if you're not stressed today in 2023, please put in the chat what you're doing. I would love to know. Some mineral biggies that I do pay attention to with my patients are potassium, magnesium, sodium, and calcium. You can see there are some food forms here with sodium that is going to be more individualized. Of course, if somebody is eating more of a Western diet, a high sodium diet, or they have issues where they need to watch their sodium intake, we wouldn't be adding more to that. But if somebody is eating more of a whole food diet, we can ensure that they're getting enough sodium if they need to by adding a little bit to what I like to call mineral drinks. And this is just a way to emphasize mineral intake on top of the food forms that we're already having day to day. Potassium sources could be orange juice, coconut water, cream of tartar, or dairy products. Magnesium isn't as prevalent in food sources that would be in this option, such as orange juice or coconut water. It's in smaller amounts. So if somebody would need a magnesium supplement, I typically use magnesium glycinate or magnesium malate, as opposed to magnesium citrate's pretty popular, but it can have more of a laxative effect, whereas we're focusing more on repletion. And if somebody does benefit from having some sodium, some mineralized salt would be an option to add to the drinks as well. And this is just a sample mineral drink recipe that we try out, see what patients like or don't like. I do try to individualize it so it's not just another supplement they're tolerating, but it's something they enjoy having and they know has a benefit on the body. So one option could be coconut water with pineapple juice and water. And then individually we can add Celtic salt or magnesium, and then cream of tartar would add more potassium as well. Moving into non-nutrition tips, we're taught so much about what to eat, but not necessarily how to eat. And when we are able to set the body up better for digestion and absorption of nutrients, we're going to probably do a lot better with what we're eating. So in our day and age, we have such a high efficiency lifestyle, high stress lifestyle. We're normally doing 10 things while we're trying to eat a meal, or we're eating breakfast in the car on the way to work. But if we're able to take 10 minutes and sit down and actually enjoy that meal and help our body enter that parasympathetic or rest and digest state, we're actually priming the body to better break those foods down. So slowing down when we're eating is a good tip on trying to actually focus on those foundations. But also deep belly breaths before meals can help to better enter that parasympathetic state. So if you're wondering how to do that, if you put a hand on your chest and a hand on your abdomen and you take a deep breath, if your chest is moving more than your abdomen, you might think, if you're breathing with your chest, sometimes you think anxiety or fight or flight response. If we do take a minute before eating to take some diaphragmatic breaths, that can help us prime the body for digestion, as well as chewing our food well, which comes down to slowing down when we're eating. But digestion starts with how we break that food down with our teeth. So actually taking the time to chew our food will aid us in digestion too. And exercise. We know the benefits of movement. I typically, with patients, start with movement that feels good and achievable to them and have them try to set their own goals with that. But some gentle guidelines are helpful just to ensure they're putting their effort in the right place. We all recommend walking. We know the benefits of cardio in helping with blood sugar control and metabolism, and we already recommend this. I do think that just as much as we recommend cardio, we should be pushing strength training as well. That can increase our muscle mass, aid in fat loss, and it also helps with metabolic health and bone density. So, doing a moderate version of both of those combined, I think building up to that from where the patient is can be really beneficial for long term health. One thing that I do think we should address, not necessarily that we recommend high intensity interval training to our clients or patients, but when we have patients that don't necessarily exercise a lot or they have a lot of physical stressors going on, and ads and marketing lead them towards these high intensity interval memberships or training sessions. If, for example, I have some patients that have a New Year's Eve or New Year's resolution goal of getting back in the gym, they sign up for one of those programs, they go really hard, really fast into high intensity interval training 4 days a week. They'll probably feel like garbage and end up quitting after a few weeks, because if we aren't used to that type of high intensity training or we're not fueling our body enough for that, that's going to very easily lead to exercise burnout, fatigue, can even harm our metabolic health when we're not fueling the body enough for that, and do the opposite effect of what we want from exercise. So just addressing or suggesting more moderate exercise, I think, is beneficial more in the long term. And the mind body connection. We've talked so much about the physical side as far as general recommendations go, but I think it is a disservice to our patients if we aren't also addressing the mental health side with them as well, because there is such a connection there. We can't out eat, out supplement, or out exercise a dysregulated nervous system. If we're always in fight or flight mode, our body is going to have lingering symptoms, and we really can't thrive in that type of setting. That can lead us to be more predisposed to anxiety issues, digestive issues, high blood pressure, the list goes on. And I think as practitioners, we should be addressing a push into a high stress life. I think in our education and where people are at today, we are basically taught how to be the most efficient in the shortest amount of time. And that can really trickle into our day to day lives and have some not so good effects on our body in the long term. If our brain recognizes something as a threat, it automatically goes into protection mode to keep us safe. Our heart rate increases, our cortisol and adrenaline levels increase, and that's a good thing. We definitely need that in the short term, but we do need to consciously be aware that we are safe to bring ourselves out of that survival mode. And sometimes we've either been in a stress state for so long that we become numb to that feeling. We don't even recognize we're in it, or we tend to just keep going because we like that feeling of being on and getting things done, and we don't want to come out of that mode. And stress triggers that can bring us into that state don't necessarily have to be bad stress. It could be a good thing, like a job change or moving, but those things are still a lot for our brain to process, and we're not necessarily meant to consume information 24/7. If we have a really high efficiency work life, and then we're moving and we have a lot on the weekends that we're doing, and we don't give our body the time or the ability to rest and to heal, we may be in this mode subconsciously. If I have patients that have lingering symptoms and we've done so much of the physical side, I do tend to circle back around and look for signs of chronic stress or survival mode, which could include stubborn fatigue, hair loss, hormone imbalances, or lingering digestive or skin issues. And while we don't all work in the mental health space, we can't necessarily make those recommendations. What we should be doing as providers is ask questions to our patients and gauge how much stress is impacting the issues that we're working on with them. That way we can help the patient to start acknowledging their stress. When we move out of feeling numb to that, we move into, okay, we recognize we're stressed. That's actually a step in the right direction, because we're able to identify unique stressors and coping mechanisms, and ultimately lead the patients to decide that they no longer need to be or can be in this chronic stress state if they want those long-term health goals and results that we're trying to get them. So by doing that, we can help to create safety for the nervous system to rest and to heal. And again, not in the mental health space myself, not a counselor, but there are some options that we can help them get the right resources as patients as part of that multidisciplinary team to help create safety for that nervous system. So intentionally engineered thoughts around situations. If I have patients come to me and they're like, oh, I had such a terrible Monday. I was super anxious. I was running to the bathroom all day. I'm so low energy now, it's going to ruin the rest of the week. They're probably going to have a pretty bad week because they've set themselves up for that outcome. And our brain looks for information that we're right in our thoughts. So by helping them come about their situations with more neutrality and say, okay, it was a bad day, definitely low energy, but if we give ourselves time at the end of the day to decompress and we get enough sleep, tomorrow may be different. Or coping mechanisms that counselors or people in the mental health space that can suggest bring us more grounding and bring us to the present is options like cold water therapy, breath work, or exposure to sunlight. If we're pretty chronically stressed, it tends to be about a past or a future scenario. So grounding methods or things that bring us to the present can help to create safety for that nervous system. Also things like bilateral movement, walking or swimming, things that use the left and right side of the brain can be beneficial, and release of emotions through therapy with a counselor or other mechanisms that are provided to them that can help them move through what they're feeling instead of pushing that to the side and letting that build up. So to bring all that information together of what we've talked about today, there is a very real gut-brain axis that connects our central nervous system with the enteric nervous system. Stress on the body, whether that's physical or mental stress, can negatively impact our gut microbiota, our permeability of our barriers, motility, secretion, and even visceral sensitivity. Patients with IBS tend to be more hyper aware of what's going on in their digestive system, and that can contribute to their symptoms as well. So when areas of the gut are not optimal, that can leave us to be more susceptible to illness and lead to a long list of symptoms within the body as well. So by taking care of those pillars of digestive health, mental health, and having the right wellness guidelines, that can provide a really good foundation for long-term health and to help heal from lingering illness as well. So when I'm working with a client or patient, I always tell them to make sure they're listening to their body as we go through changes too, because it's telling us something for a reason. That's more information for us as practitioners to go off of to really individualize protocols and make sure we're making the right moves for our patients. The last thing that I do that may not be conventional is the way that I see my clients. I am completely virtual, which I know is not functional, but the way that I'm set up to see my patients is a little bit different than the norm. When I worked in healthcare settings, I was lucky to get an hour with a client. If they wanted to sign up for a follow-up or they were able to, I would get an extra 30 minutes with them maybe every month or 3 months, which would be awesome. But I did find it was very hard for me as the dietitian in the multidisciplinary team to really help make the goals that we had into habits and give them the education that they needed on their individual body. So I actually do 3-month high touch programs with my clients. We do a really thorough initial consult. We go over all past medical history, what they've tried in the past. They have a lot of forms they fill out that help me guide our treatment plan. And we do a lot of education and also look at stool testing or blood testing to individualize what we're going to do with that person. And then we do 30-minute follow-ups every 2 weeks or 60 minutes a month to answer questions, adjust things as we need to, and provide further education and build off of that foundation that we've created. And they also have direct chat access to me every weekday as well. I found this is a really beneficial way to address issues that either we don't have a diagnosis for, or we have a diagnosis, we've tried all the things, but we just don't know what works for us as an individual, because they're spending more time and effort up front in that 3 months. And they know at the end of that, all of the education they need on the nutrition and lifestyle changes to help them in the long term, which reduces less follow-up in the long term as well. Any questions? Maybe. Let me check the chat. Oh, references.
Okay, if anybody has any questions, now is a great time to enter them into the chat box. And I am not seeing any. So if anybody has any questions, Abby provided her contact information, so you can definitely reach out to her directly to get that. Abby, thank you so much for your time this evening and for sharing your expertise with all of us. I learned something, so I appreciate you. And thank all of you for attending as well. And yeah, as I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Abby, and thank you for being here. Have a good night, everyone.